This is the emergency podcast system. This is not a test. Movies are bombing all over the country. They are posing as movies you already know. They may already be in your theaters, your neighbor's home, or even your own. Do not panic. Specialists have been dispatched. They will help you identify these pretenders and defend you against this invasion of the remake. Please stand by for further instructions.
Welcome to the Invasion of the Remake podcast. I am your host, Jason Bishop, and with me today is Sam Stepanenko.
Good afternoon, morning, or evening, whenever you're listening to this.
And Trish is away. Today we're going to have an interesting conversation. We're talking about Peeping Tom from 1960. Peeping Tom was directed by Michael Powell, and, you know, a great British director, and this effectively destroyed his career.
And it's disappointing because he has a film that's in the National Archives of Film, or what is it? And it's where they keep the films for historical preservation and relevance. And so for a director like this to have his career destroyed by a single film is quite shocking, actually, even in the 60s.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely some shocking themes to this, and maybe it's just because it's fascinating to watch this movie and then think about Psycho, like that was only 2 months later.
Yes.
And Powell was a contemporary of Hitchcock's. They were friends. Powell used to do still photography on Hitchcock's earlier works and before becoming a filmmaker himself, and they remained friends throughout their lives.
Yes, yeah, they're quite close friends from what I understand as well.
Yeah. So with Psycho coming out with similar themes just a few months later, and maybe that has something to do with British audiences versus American audiences.
And Hitchcock himself spoke to that in an interview at some point. I don't remember exactly where it was or the exact quote, but he did speak to that. He says he's surprised that his film did so well when his contemporary's film was so badly panned.
Mm-hmm. And actually, because of the critical lambasting that Peeping Tom got from the press, and maybe this is wise on Hitchcock's part, he didn't do a press screening. And so anybody who thinks when they don't do press screenings that the film might suck, maybe 9 times out of 10 you're right, but there might be that one time they're going, well, I don't think the press is going to get it.
Yes. That's a good point, is Hitchcock obviously learned from what happened to Powell and made a decision that seemed to be the right one and give audiences a chance to decide on their own, which is the way it should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we're critical of film ourselves and have our opinions on them, but we encourage people to have their own opinions always. At least I do, because you know what I like may not necessarily be what you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in this internet age where there is the bandwagon jumping on hate for Ghostbusters. Listen to our Ghostbusters episode, the 50th episode, where we compare those two films. And we do cite that as an example of how the internet kind of prejudged the film before it came out. Is it a good film? Not really, but
is it a terrible film? No.
But we watched it on our own merits. I didn't listen to any of that internet garbage because most of the people who said that hadn't even seen it.
Yeah. They
just judged it on maybe one trailer, and sorry guys, I didn't even mind that trailer. It actually was a lot better than the movie.
Listen to the episode and we'll differing opinions on this movie.
Yeah, and that's kind of an example. Like, you know, you can't just listen to the press because it's still one person's review. And maybe there's 5, 10, 15, 20 of those bad reviews. That's what Rotten Tomatoes. And we see those kind of big divisions sometimes in fan appraise as opposed to critical appraise with things like Rotten Tomatoes.
It's very true.
And most recently the DC movies, where despite not being great movies, the people going to watch them seem to be pretty forgiving about them and rate them a lot higher than the critics do. And nobody's right and nobody's wrong.
No, not usually. And I think critics...
In fact, I think it's more nobody's wrong.
Yes. Right. I think part of it, too, is critics. I mean, you know that saying, those who can do, those who can't teach? In film, I think it's those who can do, those who can't critique.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. I mean, I get the feeling that a lot of critics don't love film anymore. They may have started out loving film, but they've gotten to the point where they're looking for something to not like anymore. Mm-hmm. They're not really looking for something to love.
Yeah, if you want to love film, watch this movie.
Oh, for sure. Everything from the way it's shot to the performances to the story. This is a clinic in filmmaking, as far as I'm concerned.
It is absolutely. There's one character that bothered me. I'm like, oh, you're just a terrible stereotype. But that's it. The doctor, the psychologist.
Oh, yes.
Was horrible.
Yeah,
horrible. But his moment is so small in the movie that it's not a big deal.
Yeah,
it was the only thing I felt that had
a little bit of an off note. Yeah,
it otherwise, this thing's a clinic. Absolutely. I wish I'd seen it while I was in film school because I would have passed it around to everybody.
Oh, for sure. I mean, especially considering it's done mostly on stage sets too. It's like it's a stage production. It's not on site production or on location, I should say.
I really like that opening shot in the movie, and it's you get that POV shot. It's the coming down the street. There's a lady who turns out to be a lady of the night looking at a shop window, and we're seeing all this POV from the camera. And first time on film we've ever seen that POV shot. It was long before Halloween did it. Probably inspired things like Halloween. It
may have been. I mean, and let's talk about the POV shots really briefly. It's become culturally ingrained into the horror community in a lot of ways, because I mean, it gets specifically mentioned in Scream as the first POV from the killer standpoint.
Yeah,
horror directors revere this film, even though it's not particularly horrific in the sense of a film today.
No, nor is Psycho.
That's true.
They're shocking for their times, but without them, we probably wouldn't have seen this increasing of desensitization and more extreme. But
I'm not sure that's a good thing.
And it's maybe not a good thing for sure, but this tells so much with showing so little, like, of the crimes.
Oh, it shows very little of the crimes.
Yeah, but there's so much tension in this film when you watch it.
And I think a lot of that goes to the performance by the lead actor, whose name I've forgotten already.
That is... okay. This is going to exercise my tongue, and everybody knows I'm terrible at this. Karl-Heinz Bohm. B-O-H-M.
Yeah, so,
with the little two dots.
Yeah.
Bohm?
Yeah, Bohm.
Bohm?
Yes.
Okay, Karl-Heinz Bohm. He played the lead character, Mark Lewis. Since I'm doing this, I'll go through the rest of the cast. Anna Macy was Helen. Moira Shearer was Vivian. Brenda Bruce was Dora, who I don't even remember who she was in the movie.
She was one of the models.
Okay. There was Millie the model, really? Yeah. I might be just old enough to get that reference, but Millie the model was a comic book from the 60s. So when there was a model named Millie, I had to chuckle. Maxine Audley was Mrs. Stevens, Helen's mother in the movie. And if that seems somewhat familiar, at least to our British audience, she was in the original House of Cards, not the new one that's the hit on Netflix, but you can watch the old British one, also on Netflix. Lots of other casts. I honestly was unfamiliar with most of these people. Esmond Knight, Martin Miller, Michael Goodlife. Like, there's Shirley Ann Field, who I think was Michael Powell's ex-wife.
She may have been, yeah. I don't remember the exact details of it.
No, I don't either.
It's pretty interesting, though.
Yeah, his life is interesting. Screenplay and story by Leo Marks. He doesn't have a lot of writing credits, but my God, this was tight. It was a really tight script.
It really was. Dialogue was incredibly strong.
Yeah, lots of quotables.
And we'll get to some of those, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Karl Bohm, he's a German actor, and I had read a critique about how his accent was a little off-putting for some people, because he does still have that slight hint of German accent for a character who was born and raised in the house that he lives in. Mm-hmm. It wasn't so... I didn't find it off-putting or it didn't put me out of the film.
A German family in England is not uncharacteristic.
No, it really isn't. But he was so good, and it was funny when I first saw him on screen. I kept thinking of Udo Kier, the other sort of famous German character actor. He has the same eyes and shape of his face, and even the same accent almost.
They do share some similar qualities.
Yeah, they really do. But as far as the performances go, I mean, he really captured the different aspects of this character's personality.
Well, yeah, he's again, to make another comparison to Psycho, he's a very similar character. This understated, quiet, almost nervous type of introverted character, but he's obsessed with his family, and has this voyeuristic sickness. Like, my God, like, that's Psycho. That's the same character from Psycho.
Essentially, different parent figure is the catalyst for all this behavior, but unquestionably, it's a very
really interesting that these parallels, two filmmakers kind of hit the same themes at the same time. Psycho debuted 2 months after Peeping Tom.
Yeah, and you know what? They may have. I mean, they were friends. Maybe they were going, well, you know what? Let's both make a film like this. You know, we don't know what happened in a smoky living room with some brandy between these two directors.
Yeah. Oh man, that would have been good to be a fly on the wall.
Oh, it would have been. I would,
Peeping Tom.
Yeah, I would have loved to. I would love to think that something like that had happened. Right?
Yeah.
You get the feeling that both these directors like social experiments to a certain extent, just by the nature of their films. So it wouldn't surprise me if that was something that they did. Right?
Yeah, and I don't know. It's not like we have time to read biographies when we do these things, but Michael Powell does have his memoirs out there, so maybe there's a story in there. And if anybody has read that book, please let us know in our comments, and because
if our theories are correct, we'd love to know.
That's right, and they'll be like, "You assholes! It wasn't brandy; it was scotch."
Yes, and we're okay with that.
Yeah, we're okay with that.
But yeah, no, that's the type of thing I could see. Certainly, Hitchcock being involved in. He was, because, like I said, he did every film he made was a bit of a social experiment.
Yeah,
and the same with Powell. Like, if you look at his body of work, I mean, Black Narcissus and
The Red Shoes.
The Red Shoes. Oh, that's one of those movies that's like iconic for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look through his body of work, and there's a lot of films there, a lot of quota films, as they call them, that a lot of people say, even though they were quota films, they did not look or feel or play like a quota film. Like, it really goes to show the strength of Powell's storytelling capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, I'm not a big fan of the 30s, 40s, and 50s films. I never have been, and I'm honest about that. But when I see one that's good, oh boy, do I ever enjoy it.
Yeah, this was one of those choices where I'm watching the movie and I'm like, well, fuck. This is so good that it's going to be really, really hard to remake.
You know, honestly, this
show.
Movie, I don't know that you could remake it. Partly because of the times, and partly because of the way the world's changed. And we'll talk about that when we get to the remake section.
Yeah, and I think so. And that's really what to remake this movie. I mean, even the term Peeping Tom is kind of antiquated, but we do live probably in a more voyeuristic society than ever have been.
That's part of what would make it hard to remake this movie.
I think adding to the message, changing it with the technology of the time, would probably play well, or at least work, but you can't remake this movie as is. You contemporize it and change it. And watching this movie, I was actually struck by, like, some of the technology there. I'm like, this is actually probably some of the top technologies that were coming out in the 1960s. Like, I'm like, wow, this actually seems fairly advanced for 1960s.
Oh, it looked really good.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that's going to make it really hard to remake this movie is the subtext of the movie. I think this, and I think more so than the content of the movie, the actual primary story, I think the subtext is part of what killed Powell's career, because you almost get the feeling from some of the dialogue and the settings that Powell was really hating on the film industry. Like, he really didn't really love the industry he was in. He loved what he did in the industry, but I don't think he loved the industry.
Well, I think there's some commentary, and I'll credit Roger Ebert to this, although I'm going to paraphrase the concept here, is the film, in a way, is commenting on us as a viewer watching these type of movies. This is one of the first of its kind, so, and maybe just the criticism of that. you could read a lot into that subtext,
but it's
and
there. There's no questions there.
Having worked on sets before, it can be grueling and really soul crushing at times, and other times it's really inspiring.
Yeah.
So it changes from shoot to shoot.
Absolutely, but yeah, I mean, maybe I was misreading the subtext but there was definitely some there, especially when they were on the film set. There was some dialogue there that made me go, "Wow, there's a little bit of jabbing at the film industry here." And I was at the industry as much as the viewer.
There's a lot of politics in the industry that I've never enjoyed.
I mean, even one of the characters is named Don Jarvis. Mm-hmm. And that was a direct parody or commentary on a specific director or producer in the British film industry by the name of John Davis, and the relationship that Powell had with him, and Powell did not like him. Right. So this unlike
he does come back off as a douchebag director.
Yes, and that was very deliberate.
Yeah, actually, there's this one scene with characters that don't really play that much in an office before you get to the set of the first time you get to the set, where they go tell them one shot, one take.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So this director must have been horribly over budget. He comes off really anal and picky.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, and I mean the actress in that was not very good either.
No, deliberately. It's an actress within a movie in the movie.
Yeah.
And she was just awful.
She was awful. She was a diva, right?
Yeah, and it took her 4, 5, 6 times, or sometimes more, to really get what he was looking for sometimes.
Well,
I think out of exhaustion.
Yeah, well, did you see the first few feints weren't even feints. They were like this sort of half-assed collapse. I could see why the director was like, this is not acceptable. I didn't really blame him. I was blaming her.
Yeah, is it so hard?
Yeah, because it was she sort of like she just sort of sat down. There was no feint. She just sat down. Terrible. When they did get the shot, she actually finally did collapse to the ground.
I didn't even know what kind of movie they were trying to make.
Some of the shots, the whole what they thought was comedy. I'm like, maybe I just don't get '60s British humor. Maybe I don't, right? Because some of it, what was supposed to be funny, was not funny.
No, they didn't even try to come up with the concept for the film within the film. Yeah. So, and
it wasn't
innocuous.
Necessary.
It's not. Yeah, it's not noticed. It's not something that forwards the story in any way to give you that information. Outside of that, the attention to detail in this film is quite incredible.
It's very incredible. There's a few, like I said, if you look on IMDb, there's a few things they point out where, like continuity errors and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's really, really solid. And like I said, really, it comes down to the direction and the performances, because the actors, like every single one of them, except for this psychologist, as you mentioned, are stellar. And it has just the right balance of tension and humor, because the cops offer a little bit of comedic relief, as does Carl himself a couple times. Mm-hmm. Just in his interactions, he's very self-aware, like very, very self-aware.
Yeah.
And he's even aware of the cause for his neuroses and his call it a condition.
Mm-hmm.
He's like he knows everything about himself. Like he's really, really knowledgeable.
Yeah, and when he actually has that encounter with the psychologist, Mark actually asks about the condition and what his father was up to, because the psychologist knew his father.
Yes.
And that's part of what drives Mark, is trying to understand why his father did what he did, which was film him for every moment as he grew up.
And
terrorizing him, because some of his experiments were in trying to capture true fear.
And the nature of fear, yes. And its impact on children and adults. Like it wasn't horrifying in the sense that what he was doing was as terrifying as it could have been, but its impact on his child was horrific.
Yeah, well, it turns out with the recordings he had from his father that were in his darkroom there, his father was a fucking monster too.
He really was. I mean, he terrorized his child.
Oh, it wasn't just his child,
and yes, others. Yeah,
yeah. They never come out and say it, but I think this is serial killing passed on.
Almost, yes.
Yeah. passed on to the next generation.
Yeah, or the evolution of serial killing. It's like you take somebody who's not quite a serial killer, and he creates one.
Those audio tapes with all the screams and stuff, and I'm like, wow, was he actually killing people, or is this just the psychological impact of what he was doing to the people in the house?
Yeah, and that definitely is left up to your imagination, for sure.
Yeah.
Which makes it more powerful, is because, okay, what was happening?
Yeah. Well, that's a good tease. So let's run that trailer and let everybody catch up with us.
Look out! Look out! Look out! Take care. You are being watched. We repeat, take care, for you are now alone with a killer. We warn you, don't let him see the fear in your eyes. For this is what he seeks, and this is why he kills.
Where are you? Where are you?
Look out for Carl Byrne as the Peeping Tom. Fear him, but pity him also.
It's so good.
Watch out for Moira Shearer as the lovely stand-in who innocently dances into danger.
Imagine someone coming towards you who wants to kill you, regardless of consequences.
A madman?
Yes.
Wait!
Anna Massey is the girl who falls victim to the charms of the lonely stranger upstairs.
Switch it off, Mark! Mark, switch it off!
Maxine Audley as the blind woman who senses the danger that threatens her and her daughter, but is helpless.
Don't be frightened.
Not be frightened. What? So put that camera away!
There is no future for anyone who tries to befriend him. He invades the privacy of innocent people till the piercing eyes of his camera meet the terrified eyes of his victims. And with a compulsion akin to madness, he shoots the final, fearful scene.
Gotta like those 60s ads. They're it's all voiceover, and it's funky.
Very interesting, and I almost wish that we would see more of that now, because it does get into it does kind of try to tease you into it rather than give stuff away.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like, wow, maybe I should see this. This sounds really interesting.
Yeah, there's so little actual dialogue. Like, it is an audio podcast, so you can't see the visuals from the trailer, but even then, it goes pretty quickly and just gives you snapshots of what you're in for. You really don't know what you're in for.
No, really. And today's trailers, I mean, we're getting a little sidetracked here, but today's trailers, they tell you what you're going to see. Right? Mm-hmm. Not always well, but they do. They give you quite a bit. They reveal quite a bit before you ever get to see the film. And sometimes they give you the only good parts in the film.
Yeah, sometimes I watch a trailer and I'm like, I'm good.
Yep.
Speaking of trailers, last week when we were talking about The Ring, I should mention before that recording, it was supposed to open in October. And since that recording, it has now been pushed to February, which is the fourth time they've moved that movie.
Oh, it's going to be bad.
Fourth. I know. I'm like, oof. I even said last week that I didn't really dig what I saw in the trailer. And just getting thrown into February and dumped there away from Halloween.
Yeah, because February is no man's land, isn't it? Or
yeah,
it has been traditionally.
Which means they have zero faith in that movie.
They've taken a look at it and gone, yeah, no, this is a piece of shit.
Yeah, if it moves again, it's moving direct to video.
Yeah.
But yeah. Four times, I'm like, oh man, I even if it's a bad movie, I kind of feel sorry for him at this point. Just release the fucking thing.
Yeah, but it's like pulling a Band-Aid off. Just do it.
Just do it.
Right. If they'd have left it where it was, at least maybe it would have made some money due to the Halloween audience. Now they put it into what is, like I said,
the dead zone.
The dead zone, right?
Just before, yeah, which Yeah, February is probably the deadest time of the year. I mean, we're seeing those blockbusters get spreading out more and more, so things are starting to happen again by by March, August.
Yeah. I mean, last year was an exception. I mean, we did have Deadpool in February, and it did spectacularly well, right?
Yeah.
Right? But it's an exception to the rule, but it's maybe the start of something changing. So maybe there might be something there, but I don't think so.
Yeah, well, you throw something exceptional in February when everybody buries their movies in February, then yeah, of course it's going to stand out. Yeah. Not to say Deadpool was a bad movie, because it's not. It's a great movie.
It's a great movie.
But not as great as this. It is not going to be one of the top 100 movies you must see before you die, like Peeping Tom.
Exactly. Right. And really, if you have not seen it, which I suspect most of you haven't, please do. It is worth the hour and 40 minutes of your time.
I had seen a little bit about this in a documentary about slasher movies, and they do call this like the first slasher movie.
And I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, in what people have come to know as slashers, maybe it doesn't fit in quite into that genre of Jason Freddy anymore, but if you think of where it started, and a lot of people would think Psycho, I'm like, well, yeah, this predates Psycho.
Yes, by just a few months, but it does predate it. And I think the reason and this is probably why the slasher term was coined, was because this was the first sort of mainstream film where the killer didn't use a gun. Yeah,
and it had kind of a gimmicky device to murder people.
It was gimmicky, but it served a purpose. There was intent behind the gimmick. It wasn't gimmicky for the sake of gimmicky.
No, yeah, it's not like I got a glove full of razors gimmicky, or there was reason and psychological impact for that character for why everything he did.
Yeah, and the impact it would have on his victim, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of what made it work so well. And this isn't revealed until like the very end of the film, which is what makes it really, really cool. Mm-hmm. Is that the final piece of the gimmick doesn't drop until like literally the last 5 minutes of the film.
Yeah.
It just tells you, it just ties the story together so nicely.
Yeah, it's a slow reveal of all of it. You get the camera right off the bat, but you don't. That first kill, you really don't know. Yeah, it's just a scream. You don't know what happened at all. And he picks up this hooker, and she takes him to her apartment. I always thought that witness on the stairs would come into play, but
they did.
And and they only really mentioned she couldn't figure out.
He was carrying something.
Yeah, he was carrying something, but he keeps himself kind of hunched over, and he's this nervous type with the social disorders, so he's not very good at engaging people. Yeah, so the murder happens in her apartment, and we don't really see what triggers it. And then there's the investigation, and with that old lady, she didn't really remember outside of what that was. We don't see the cops until midway through the movie, actually.
A good third to midway. You're right. I really liked the cops. I thought they were really
they're
good,
not bumbling or goofy or anything. They
have a sense of humor, but they're not goofy.
Yeah, and they're shown as pretty competent.
Yes, and it was nice to see.
They're a bit starstruck because they're investigating on a film set as well.
Yeah, and they have a little fun with that without being overly goofy, like you said, goofy about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Carl's like the reveal of Carl's kill pattern, I guess is the best way of it, is very subtly done. But they reveal parts of his character quite early too. Like there's this scene, the first scene in the newsagent's shop where he's about to do his photo shoot. Not only is he a focus puller for a major film studio, but he has a side business taking girly shots.
Yes, he shoots softcore porn, and he's a camera assistant.
But yeah, there's that scene where the newsagent's he's late for his shoot, and the newsagent is giving him heck and giving him direction on what the shots are supposed to look like, and then you see him doing his shoot with this rather chatty model who knows him, that she's worked with him before. And because she mocks him and teases him and stuff like that, so she's got a relationship with him, as it were. And then there's this other model who you don't really see.
Yeah, you see kind of a side shot of her, so more of a profile. You don't see much of her face, But, you see that she's a very lovely looking girl.
And she's quite pretty.
Yeah, nice side boob. Yeah. You get a good shot of her side boob. Very, very pretty from the profile that you see. And then when her face turns, and she does have a lip deformity.
Yes. And she says the line, she says, "You don't need to shoot my face anyhow for these kinds of photos," right? Like, so, and then this is where you start to really see Carl, is he becomes obsessed with photographing her face, right? And they talk about fear a lot in this film, but this indicates something deeper in his personality. It's not just fear, but it's deformity and discomfort.
Yeah,
right?
it's her discomfort with him staring at her face. He finds it beautiful. I think he finds just that emotion beautiful.
Yes.
Like we do see him in his childhood peeping over a wall, staring at a couple making out, and that happens more than once actually, where he sees and films people in various acts of jubilation. In the case of Helen, when we first see her, is having her 21st birthday party, and he's caught looking in a window, and being fairly obvious about it, but he's not trying to be really stealthy. And despite the fact that everybody's noticed him at that point, he's still looking before he snaps out of it. He's fascinated by what he sees.
Yeah, I think it's because these are emotions and interactions that he didn't get to have. So they compel him when he sees other people, because he doesn't understand them. At least that's the impression I get anyhow, is that they're beyond his comprehension, these moments of joy or lust or any of that. Like, really the only emotion that he understands because of his upbringing is fear and discomfort and disquiet.
Yeah, and it is something he's can bring out in others. Is one of the few emotions he does get.
Yes.
And I think maybe that's why he captures as much as he does, is he's trying to capture them to understand it. But he only understands it as long as it's on his screen, and then once that screen goes away, so does whatever drew him to it in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. So
though that dying of the light kind of moment.
Yeah, and I think there's a line in there, at least a commentary in one of the articles I had read about this film is he, and I maybe even says it in the movie, is that everything he photographs he loses.
Yes, right? It's a line in the movie. Yeah.
And it's true with this character, and I mean it comes up later in the film, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But he definitely has a fear of losing anymore.
Yeah, he actually refuses to film Helen.
Yes,
because he doesn't want to lose her.
Yeah, and we'll talk about his relationship with Helen. And there's one more thing I wanted to comment about Carl's behavior that I've now forgotten.
Marx,
sorry. Karl Marx.
Wrong guy.
Yeah. Yeah, there was something else about his behavior and the filming and stuff like that's escaped me. It'll come back to me.
Okay. Well, yeah, and yeah, so let's move into Helen. Helen is the neighbor from downstairs. Mark lives in the family home, but he can't afford I guess not the mortgage so much as just the payments on the house, just the general upkeep of the house on his own. It's a large house.
Yeah, and so he's trying to do a rooming house.
Yeah. So he has lots of neighbors. They don't even know he's the landlord.
No, they don't, and that's revealed during his first real interaction with Helen.
Yeah,
who's a very plain woman.
Yeah.
But very, very pleasant.
Yeah, she's invited everybody to her birthday party that lives in the house. And there's a guy named Tony and a few other people that we never actually see play again. But Tony's the only other one who seems to have an interest in Helen in and of himself.
Yes, he does.
And he's the one who first notices Mark looking in the window. And rather than being creeped out, she's fascinated by him. So she goes to see him upstairs, takes a break from her party and goes upstairs to invite him down.
And that reminded me of what I wanted to mention about Carl.
There you go.
It shows this is the first scene where you see that people who interact with Carl, when they actually interact with him, like him. And they quite like him. Mm-hmm. You see it with his coworkers later on in the film. They all really like him. You see it with with Myra's character, Vivian.
Vivian,
She really likes him.
Yeah.
There's a scene later on in the film where a very attractive woman walks past him, and she's almost flirtatiously says, "Hi, Mark." Right? Like there's a lot of these moments because he's not an unattractive man. He's actually quite handsome.
Yeah.
So Helen's interest is not unusual when you sort of realize that. He is a handsome man, and there's something intriguing about this man who kind of keeps to himself.
Yeah, this good-looking but mysterious guy, maybe a boyish charm.
Yeah.
He's shy, and I think
It makes him mysterious.
Maybe it's a maternal instinct that kicks in a little bit. Yeah, but yeah, I think you're right. Maybe it's just the mystery of his character. And he is. We don't really see him comfortable. He's not comfortable in his own skin. Like I don't think there's a scene where we don't see him in his trench coat.
There's not one. I was just about to mention that, actually. He wears that coat in every single scene.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we see him wear a second coat over the coat, but he never takes off his trench coat.
And I think and he's never without his camera.
And
that plays later on in the film is his attachment to this one camera.
Yeah, it's a bit of a safety blanket for him, and I think a lot of things are like I
think the coat is even, right?
Yeah,
because it allows him to hide.
Yeah,
right, and allows him to hide his camera when he's surreptitiously. I said that wrong. Filming things because he doesn't just film his killings; he films the aftermath.
Yes,
he loves following it up, and he calls it his documentary.
Well, try to explain it any other way.
Yeah. But he always tries to do it secretly so that people don't see him doing it because he doesn't want to have to explain.
I love that camera, by the way.
It's a really neat camera.
Yeah, I have 3 8mm Bolexes, and that are much smaller than that camera, and they probably came out of just not that far after that camera that he was using in the film. Yeah. So they're fairly small and compact, given that they're filmed reel-to-reel cameras.
Yeah, no, it was quite compact. I mean, he was able to carry it around in a satchel.
Yeah,
right. And it hid under his coat, and it wasn't particularly obvious when he was hiding it either. Right? I mean, you could see that he was hiding something, but it wasn't like huge.
Yeah, which in today's world, much easier to hide a camera.
Yeah, much easier.
Yeah. Put some tape on your computer cameras, people. You never know who's watching.
Yeah, especially when you're watching porn. Definitely you don't want anybody seeing that.
Oh.
Yeah, I went there.
Oh, poor Trish not being here. So, yeah, he starts developing this relationship with Helen.
And I think
it's more from her because I don't get the feeling he voluntarily engages a lot.
No, and I think that's why he sort of develops, and he does develop a relationship with her, is because she actually engaged him. Mm-hmm. Unlike most people, she actually was interested in him as a person and his past, and she saw that film with the very first film he shows with what the horrible things his father did to him. Mm-hmm. And she didn't shy away. She just became more compassionate towards him.
Yeah.
And that's where you start to see really Mark's struggle, is he's now actually invested in another human being who's drawing out an aspect of his personality he didn't know he even had.
Yeah. Actually, I made note when watching this movie, the only time I noticed him being confident about and just having a more commanding presence was around usually his next victim.
Yes.
Is the only time I ever saw him being confident in what he was doing, because it's the only world he's truly comfortable in.
There's one other moment where he comes across as very confident and firm, and that's when he's talking to Helen's mother in his studio. Mm-hmm. There's that scene where he's talking to her and he makes that promise to never photograph Helen. And there you start to see that aspect because it's something he's certain of.
Well, and yeah, Helen's mom's always suspicious of Mark right from the get-go, but he stands truly revealed in front of her, this blind person. Like, so he's got very personal films running, sometimes of the murder, and she can't see it. And he's at times revealed and it shows some real true emotion in front of her. And at one point, she almost becomes the next victim.
Yeah, at one point she does.
And she never knows.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And then that's maybe where the confidence comes from, is because he made the choice to not make her a victim.
Yeah,
right?
And those choices to pull away from those voyeuristic tendencies started a little earlier on the date with Helen, where she asks him to leave the camera behind and locks it up in her room.
Yeah, and
which was his childhood room.
Which
his mother's room.
Yeah, which used to be his mother's room, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's initially reluctant, but he is interested enough about what's happening between him and Helen that he makes that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she changes him, and it's really critical to the way this film plays out is this juxtaposition between the person that he's been and the person he's starting to become.
Yeah.
Right? Because it really, I think if this relationship hadn't been in the movie, the ending would have been a very different type of ending.
Yeah.
It would have been very much the traditional slasher ending rather than the ending it ended up being. And this is part of what makes it such a great film is the way it ends.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll get there.
Yeah, it's an inevitability, I think, in the character's mind as well.
Yes.
Like, I don't think he expects to get away with what he's doing.
I don't
forever.
think he wants to.
Yeah.
I mean, he's documenting it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that at some point, he subconsciously, I think he does want to get caught.
Oh, well, in fact, he kind of prompts it.
And I mean, I think that he even starts to drop his clues as we're watching the film. He's dropping sort of clues. He's not ready to be caught yet, but I think he's getting really close to being there.
Yeah, honestly, if he made another conscious choice to resist those urges instead of feeling like, the doors were closing on him or the walls were closing in on him, and then he had to get one more in, he would have gotten away with it.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Because he was very good at what he did.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, he was a very good killer.
Yeah, even when he's out and about and being followed, he knew he was being followed.
Yeah. He's very, like you said, he wasn't just self-aware; he was just aware in general.
Yeah,
he only makes one real, obvious slip up, and that's after the killing of Vivian.
Oh, when he's in the roof.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. But we should talk about the scene with Vivian.
Yeah, it's a good scene.
Really great scene.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed watching it.
Yeah. Now, Vivian was Moira Shearer. She was also in Michael Powell's The Red Shoes. And she's a dancer by trade, at least before Red Shoes, which...
Yeah, she was a ballet dancer. She was actually a premier ballet dancer as well. She wasn't just like a background dancer. She was the prima ballerina at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it in this scene.
Oh, yeah. She's a very good dancer.
And I think we were talking about this off mic, that she said in an interview that Red Shoes ended her ballet career because the other dancers no longer trusted her.
Yeah, I don't understand that, but maybe it's just the mix between media or the commentary on something that they didn't want revealed. I don't know. I've never seen Red Shoes, and I don't know what you read. So
yes, no, they said it was just that particular piece of
yeah. But she had a long acting career, so don't feel too bad
as did
for her.
So many of the actors in this movie.
Everybody kind of kept acting right up until their deaths,
and in some pretty significant roles, a lot of them.
Yeah,
and I think there's some that are still alive and still acting.
Yeah, there probably aren't too many left. But
there aren't too many, but there were some that were making films up as recently as the last couple of years. But yeah, this aside from Michael Powell, this movie did not do any harm to anybody's career.
No, this was pretty good, except for Michael Powell. Now, I found her really fun, and her character very fun and boisterous.
Yeah.
And I get the feeling she was also interested in Mark.
Oh, certainly, yes.
Yeah. And she's kind of teasing him, and she's very relaxed in his presence. Like, she's been asked to...
She's a stand-in.
Yeah, she's a stand-in during the shoots, and after the shoot, she kind of hides in the studio to get some off-studio time with Mark, because Mark wanted some stuff for his documentary. She doesn't. I don't think she's quite aware of what she's.
I kind of got the feeling that he was shooting a demo reel for her.
Oh, okay.
Right, so he was actually helping her out.
Okay, I was unsure what the motivation of the scene was.
Yeah,
but...
no, it was about her. It was about her putting her career forward by getting her a demo reel that she can share with directors, so she doesn't have to be a stand-in anymore.
Right.
That was at least the feeling I got from the dialogue and what they were doing.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense in my mind too.
Yeah. But Mark has seized this opportunity as well. Under the guise of doing a favor, he's now got a potential victim.
Yeah,
and the scene is great. There's some great dialogue about and the interactions, and Mark's plays with her a little bit. He plays with her quite a bit actually.
Yeah.
with allowing her to play with the big camera and sort of dancing around and getting relaxed, and it's just it plays so well, and the music that she dances to is just so much fun. It's so energetic.
Now, I did notice in that scene, and when she does kind of play with that big camera, and he gets very uncomfortable being in front of it.
Oh yes.
And rightfully so, being in front of a camera for most of your life with your parent, with your dad anyway. I kind of understand where that phobia might come from.
But he still plays to it because
just a moment before I think the whatever traumas kind of kick in on him.
Yes, yeah, and it plays really nicely again. Like it's just such a well put together scene, like almost every scene in this movie. But there's the dancing scene, and then there's the bit with the stage setting with the trunks and the stuff like that, because it does play later on in the film. Yeah, he gets her relaxed, and then he's trying to evoke an emotion out of her. He wants her to show fear, and she's not doing a very good job of it.
Yeah,
because she's just relaxed. She likes being around Mark. She's comfortable around Mark.
Yeah,
and then this is where he gets to make her uncomfortable, and this is the first part of how he kills his victims. The tripod for his camera has a concealed blade under one of the legs, which was really slick.
Yeah, so he just kind of pulls that leg up and then points it towards the victim.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he uses that to back her into the trunk, and at which point she collapses. And conveniently, she falls right into a way of concealing her body. But he planned it.
Yes.
Right? And that's the beauty of it, is he actually planned it.
Yeah, the one thing he doesn't plan is that shitty director coming back to reshoot a scene with those trunks.
Exactly. And her body gets discovered, I think, sooner than he had planned.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was a mistake on his part. It was
it was, let's take advantage of it while it happens.
Yes.
He shoots it when it happens.
But yeah, and he's trying really hard to evoke that terror on her face.
Yeah. And we still don't get that reveal of what that is exactly.
How he's accomplishing it. You just think it's the terror of having somebody point a knife at you.
Yeah.
While filming it.
Yeah, you'd think that would be enough.
I think that would be enough. But there's more.
There's more.
So at this point, doesn't he go immediately to his... No, it's the next night that he goes on his date with Helen. That's right. 'Cause
yeah.
She comes up to see him after he comes home from killing Vivian, though.
Yeah.
Right, and that's where they make their date.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and there's nice moments where she brought him some cake, and then he buys her like this dragonfly brooch.
That's right. He gives her her birthday gift.
The birthday gift was, I think, at that date when they make the date.
When they make the date, that's right.
Yeah. And just before she does come up, that actually is where we really start
to meet her mother.
To meet the mom, yeah. And we see that she's blind.
And a drunk.
And hiding it from her daughter.
Is she really?
Well, I mean, she drinks in front of her, but she's resistant to her daughter going to see Mark. She's got bad feeling about Mark.
But she still doesn't try to discourage her either. It's really weird. Actually,
yeah, I don't think Helen was aware her mom was drinking as much as she was. And I'm not sure if her mom, like, we see her drinking a lot, but it seems to be due to stress of the situation. Like, she might be
more than normal
because of her daughter's interest in Mark. I mean, that's an interpretation. It could be she was just a drunk. She says, her daughter says, like, I'll be up there 5 minutes. Well, if you're 5 minutes, I might not even be done this drink. As soon as her daughter leaves, she chugs the thing down. So she's kind of hiding it, but she not hiding the fact that she drinks. And like, everybody kind of drinks a little bit, but
especially in the 60s, right?
Yeah. Oh, there's bottles everywhere in that room.
Yeah. It's true.
Like, that was one thing. I'm like, so much liquor just out everywhere.
Yeah, I don't think alcoholism was the big deal it is now.
No, probably not in the 60s. No. Free love, free booze, free.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a social activity, right?
Yeah, I guess so. And actually, that was in the first meeting with Helen from the birthday party. Mark offers her a drink, and then he realizes, I have none. Like, he doesn't drink.
Yeah, he has milk.
He's got milk. It seems a little abnormal, I guess, in the 60s. It was something that wasn't normal.
It wasn't normal, no, because
Yeah.
everybody drank socially, and she even comments on that. She says it wouldn't do for the birthday girl to be seen drinking water,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was expected that people would enjoy spirits.
Yeah. Yeah. The layers on that they give the mom for not having a lot of screen time is
She was
it's
spectacular.
quite interesting. Yeah. I really was intrigued by them. I could probably watch a whole movie just about that mom.
Yeah, she was so severe looking.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, it took
Just
me a few minutes to realize that
judgmental
she was blind.
Yeah.
And,
I wasn't sure right away either. You know, it didn't just the fact that she never makes eye contact in the
it
conversation.
wasn't until
with
she reached
Helen.
for the bottle to pour herself that glass.
Yeah.
And she just reached over
And
kind of felt around.
That's when I realized.
That's when I realized it as well. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was really subtle. Powell never spoon-fed you anything in this movie.
No.
Not a single thing was spoon-fed to you. He expected you to watch it
Yeah.
and pick up the clues he was giving you.
Yeah. Now, in a later scene, Mark has come home. He's reeling up one of his films to watch that, I think one of his murders.
I think so, yeah. I think it was the most recent one. I think he's going to watch Vivian's murder.
Yeah. And off in the corner, standing in the dark, is Helen's mom. And she says she often comes up there, most nights, because it's the only place in the house she really feels comfortable. And it's a dark room, of
Yeah.
course. There's a certain logic to it, although how she knows about it is, I guess it's more of a feeling than anything else.
Well, and she comments about how she hears him clomping around up there in the wee hours of the morning and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
and I think she knows that he's a filmmaker, right?
Yeah, and she always hears that camera going.
Yeah. So I think she had the clues, right?
Yeah. That projector, I should say.
And she says, she has this line. She says, "I think of all the rooms in the house, I think this would be the one that you'd have locked."
Yeah.
Right? She actually says that. So
Oh, well, it's because his father never allowed him to have any keys.
yes,
So, like, makes you wonder how the renters got keys.
yeah. I mean, it's a small hole in the plot, but I mean,
Oh, not a big deal,
No,
but
no.
again, it says a lot about his character.
Yeah, it doesn't occur to him to lock things up.
Yeah. He keeps to himself, and he doesn't expect anybody to go up there and have enough interest to look.
Yeah, I don't know if he just sort of subconsciously it doesn't occur to him that somebody would intrude on his privacy, or he just has faith that in that the society of the day, people would just respect it anyhow.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe it's the '60s. You don't keep your door locked, kind of thing, and it hasn't been like that in a very long time.
It has not been like that in a very long time.
So I don't know. Maybe that's just one of those dated things that doesn't play as well as it did back then. But the scene itself is quite powerful. It's this confrontation of saying things but not saying things.
Yes.
Like, it is really dancing around ideas and this verbal jousting between the two.
She's trying to get him to reveal what he does.
Yeah, what he does, what his intentions to his daughter are.
Yes. And he tries to alleviate her concerns without telling her anything.
But he does give in to emotional outbursts with the films
Yes.
that are playing because he's so easily distracted by them and just by emotion in general.
Yeah, and you mentioned here that this is where she almost becomes a victim, because he has the camera and he does reveal the blade again, and then he makes a conscious decision to not kill her and I don't know if it's because of the impact it would have on Helen, or if because he's starting to genuinely like this woman, because I kind of get the feeling that he's impressed by her and likes her.
I think probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Like it's
even though she's kind of a mean woman, it's hard not to like her.
Yeah.
Right.
She's just being protective of her daughter.
And she's got this honesty about her. Whatever she says is what she means. And I think that appealed to Mark in a certain way. There's no playing games with her.
Yeah.
She outright tells him that she has questions about him. And so, yeah, no, I think that you're right. There's part of it is, one is the impact it's going to have on Helen, and the other is I kind of like this lady.
Yeah, and this movie toys with its audience.
Yes.
A lot in that regard. Like there's a lot of psychology going on with the characters, but it toys with the audience as well.
That's right.
It's very clever in its manipulation of you.
Yes, and I mean immediately after the scene, this is where he goes out of his way to reassure her, right? And he kind of gives her a clue, right? When he says, "Don't worry, I will never photograph your daughter," right? So you kind of get the impression that he knows that she knows something about what he does. She's heard something about these murders, and she suspects him. And
Yeah, well, she's like, "What studio do you work for?"
Yeah.
This was at the first meeting
Yes.
between them when Helen's actually present. What movie studio to work at? And it was Helen who says the wrong studio.
Yes.
So they know where the murder happened, at which studio the murder happened, and then Helen's the one who says the wrong one by accident. She just. I assumed it was more of a slip of the tongue than protecting him or anything else. It was just she got it wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she wasn't really sure.
Yeah, and that protects Mark right off the bat. You can see him trying to come up with a little bit of a lie, and then he doesn't have to tell it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can see it on his face.
You can totally see it on his face again. Credit to the acting.
Yeah.
But this is where she seems to get the suspicion that she has a suspicion, and he kind of confirms it for her later on without saying outright that I'm doing this, right?
Yeah.
But your daughter's safe from me because I will never photograph her. And again, one of my favorite lines in the movie is that particular line, because it's a subtle acknowledgement that they're now both aware of each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really do enjoy that. And I mean, we're already almost at the culmination of the film at this point.
Yeah, true enough. If you wanted to dissect every scene, you could, but we'd be here for 3 days.
And we want you to watch it. We don't want to tell you all every little nuance of the films. Watch it.
No. Actually, yeah, I kind of want to get to that. I mean, now the cops come in with the murder at the studio.
Well, this is where they start to get...
they start connecting dots.
Yeah, because they are at the murder scene at the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah, and you don't see them for a while. Yeah, they do. I'm surprised they don't remember, but Mark is caught photographing the murder scene outside. So they're ushering the lady out, the witness out. It's kind of crowded with reporters during this investigation, and Mark has crossed the witness barrier so one of the cops comes over and, hey, what paper are you with? Which I thought was weird because that was certainly not a stills camera.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm like, you don't know the difference between a stills camera and a film camera? Okay. But Mark just says paper, and the guy's like, okay. And he says the Observer.
Yes.
Which I'm like, awesome.
Yes, it was very awesome, very witty. One of those subtle nods of humor that does show up in the film from time to time.
Yeah, it just these little hints, like, that's what I do. I'm the watcher.
Yeah, no, I did like that.
Yeah,
but the cops, they're investigating the murder at the...
Yeah, and they're commenting on the fear on the face of the first victim, and they'd never seen anything like that. So they get to the crime scene at the studio, and now this is that shitty actress within the movie. Within the movie, they're reshooting that scene we talked about earlier, and she's like, "Oh, can I see that trunk? Can I see that trunk?" And this guy pulls this other trunk out,
which was very funny.
It's funny because it's really heavy, but you don't want to break the scene, so he's trying to get it up and lift it up on this table. Opens the trunk for her to look into, and she has this big scream. And the director's like, no, you're not supposed to do that in this scene. and yeah, there's Vivian's body in there. So they've come to investigate that scene. They open up the trunk, and they're going, and then they see the sheer terror on the victim's face, on the corpse that they find, and then they're like, now I've seen it twice. Yeah. Like they're suddenly making a correlation.
A connection, yes.
Yeah.
And then this actually, I'm jumping around a little bit, as I usually do. So when they go back to reshoot this scene, they substitute hats for the trunks.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting little thing, is Mark has successfully instilled fear in somebody else just by this reveal of Vivian. Because now this lead actress, when she sees the blue hat, freaks right the fuck out.
Yeah, because it is just a trigger, a memory trigger.
Yeah, it was.
It's still the colors.
Genius. It was genius, and I don't remember seeing Mark's reaction to that terror, but I'm sure that the character would have just loved it.
Yeah,
because he successfully created terror in somebody without even doing anything.
And that's actually when they're looking at the body in the trunk, that's actually when Mark's up in the rafters.
Yes.
He climbs up there to get a bird's eye view of everything. And that's when we actually see very far off in the distance Vivian's corpse.
Yes.
Which was probably pretty shocking in the 60s.
Yes, because nothing's graphic in this movie. You never actually see a killing.
No.
There's never any blood.
No. Was there? I think there was some right at the end, the last scene.
The last scene, there was maybe a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit. And that's when the pens and pencils fall out of his jacket. I'm like, you nerd! You got caught by your pen protector,
yes,
your pocket protector. That's when you probably needed one.
Yes, exactly. But and of course, there's
he gets away though.
This look of terror on his face that he's revealed himself, but he pulls back, and the cops look around. They don't see him, so they don't think anything of it.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, that's probably the only time that the cops seemed a little incompetent to me, actually.
Yeah.
Is they didn't investigate the strange noise.
Actually, no. The one guy does go off to investigate. Mark's coming down on the back wall, and there's a flashlight, and he stops. They just don't see him.
Yeah.
So they did go investigate. They just
didn't do a very good job of it.
Yeah, they just sucked at it.
Yeah. So but again, it was the only time, because even after their interview with Mark, you kind of get the impression that they are that they consider him a bit of a suspicious character. Maybe not a suspect yet, but a suspicious character for sure.
Yeah. Because he's definitely a little odd.
Yes, and even when he was really good in that interview with him, but his oddness still came through.
Yeah. Well, and then he actually photographs the cops doing their investigation.
Yes,
and they're like, "Hey, this guy's making me a movie star."
Yeah, and I think it was genius that he came in with his camera and handed it to him and says, "Just in case you wanted to take the film."
Yeah.
Right. I thought, great misdirect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like just one of those little tiny notes of attention that we've talked about before make a great filmmaker.
Yeah.
When you pay attention to those little tricks like that.
Yeah, when they're doing the interviews, it's probably one of my favorite lines in the movie where he's just sitting on the hallway with another employee.
Yes.
Mark, are you crazy? Yes. Do you think they'd notice?
Genius, yeah. And you can't help but laugh. Like I said, one of those moments of levity that are so important in films like this.
Yeah, and again, he's just sitting there. He totally reveals himself to this guy. Like, you know, he doesn't come out and say that he's doing it, but that he was the guy who did it. But he's certainly challenging it at this point. And I think he's enjoying the chase just a little bit too much.
He's starting
the game.
Helen's broken him. He's starting to go off the rails already.
Yeah.
Right. Like whatever happened, like what this dynamic between him and Helen has changed something in him, and now he's almost seems like he's eager to get caught to get it over with. Because I think somewhere in his brain he says, if I get caught, I can move on with my life with Helen, and I don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a compulsion. He can't help himself.
Oh, it's certainly a compulsion. Absolutely.
So, and I mean, the first time you get to see him sort of breaking free of that compulsion is with her mother.
Yeah.
And really, there's only 2 real victims in this movie. Well, 3, actually, I guess, technically, if you count the end. But
no, there's 3. Yeah, you get the hooker,
Vivian,
and Millie.
Oh, Millie, that's right.
Millie's the last one.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about Millie. So yeah, there's. I mean, I don't even know if that's enough. If that's a killing spree or a serial killer, but.
Well, we don't even know if there was any before that.
That's true, but because this is the first victim, they say this is the first victim they've seen with that type of fear on their face.
Yeah.
It kind of suggests that this is new for him.
Yeah,
like he's gone from whatever he was doing to cope before to this new phase of murder.
Yeah,
at least that's the feeling I get, because he's not young.
Yeah, yeah.
So if he's been committing murders, either the bodies haven't been found or he was doing them somewhere else.
Yeah, probably somewhere else,
yeah.
if he had. But yeah, the hooker probably makes sense that she would be the first victim.
At least in context of the movie, for sure. Because, yeah, they sort of market it as a serial killer. But and you know what, maybe there are victims prior to that, because he talks about watching the film, so there's more to it than just these 3 victims that we see.
Yeah, and actually he goes after Millie because he couldn't quite complete what he was doing with Vivian. Like, when he had to leave during the investigation, he couldn't get those reactions.
Yeah.
I think he felt incomplete in that moment, which he still had a drive to continue. So that's where Millie comes in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. And this is where you sort of see that the cops suspect him of something. They feel he's suspicious because they're following him around at this point. Mm-hmm. And he goes to the news agents to do his weekly shoot or whatever it is that he does.
Yeah, he actually books it. Like, the guy was closing up shop and just hands him the key, which, again, he's hesitant to take the key because he was never allowed a key.
Yes. And so the police see him go into the news agents.
Yeah, he's being tailed because he was a little odd, so they just want to make sure about this guy. And he just carries on like I think he thinks he's already been found out.
Yeah, because he sees the cop out there.
Yeah.
Because he closes the blind, so he knows the cop is there.
Yeah.
He knows that he's going to get caught.
Yeah.
Because he knows that the cops saw him go in, and he knows that they're going to find that body.
Yeah. Well, I think he thought that they were onto him beforehand. They
Yes.
weren't. They were just covering their bases.
Yeah.
Now, if he hadn't gone in there and killed somebody, they would have left him alone.
Most likely, yes.
They actually say it. Like, when the cop phones back to report on this guy's action, he just went here and here. I don't think there's any... He went to the news agent.
Nothing unusual.
Nothing unusual. So the other cop just kind of makes note of that, and he's like, okay, come on in. Not a big deal.
Yeah, that's right. Because he's not there because he doesn't follow them after he leaves the news agent.
Yeah.
That's right.
But then when the news agent opens the next morning and finds Millie's body and reports it, and then the cop gets back and hears news agent, well, ding, 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 ding.
Yes. we have our killer. We saw him go in.
Yeah, we saw him go in, and there's a body there. Huh.
Yeah.
Only one guy had the key.
Yeah, 2 and 2 equals 4 in this particular case, yeah.
Yeah. Now, when he comes back home, when Mark comes back home, Helen had gone to see him. Now, Helen, during this time, from her first meeting, has kind of developed this idea for a kid's book, this magic camera.
Oh, yes.
Which is important.
It is important.
Yeah, this magic camera story for children that I can't remember the actual conceit of this of the book, but it's this magic camera that captures emotions of children.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. I'm like, okay, I can see how that works as a kid's story, and I'm not sure if Mark likes the idea or not.
But he likes Helen, so he's going to work with it.
Yeah, and Helen's asked him to help her with the book by doing some photographs. Now, her publisher says, like, well, we should do drawings and stuff, but she didn't think that would capture what she was trying to do. And they're like, well, I don't think a photographer would, but she was confident enough that Mark could do what she needed for the book.
Yeah, because of the fantastic nature of the photos, they didn't think it would be possible to photograph them.
Right.
Or to make them appear as photographs.
Yeah.
But Mark is very confident that he can photograph anything.
Yeah.
And he's willing to do it because he likes Helen.
Yeah. Now, she's gone up to see him, and he's not there, and she's gotten her first copy of the book. She writes a little note for him and accidentally turns... Was it accidentally? I think she accidentally turns on one of the cameras.
Because
the projectors.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think it's deliberate. I think she wants to see what he's got on the camera.
Yeah.
Right? And it just happens to be Vivian's killing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awkward.
Yes. But it leads to the climax of the film.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, inevitably, this is going to be a crushing thing to discover.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And Mark, at this point, kind of knows this is his kind of final moments. Like, cops closing in, and Helen's made this terrible discovery, although she never really gives up on him.
No, she doesn't. She tries to understand why he does it
Yeah.
more than anything else. It's not. She's horrified by it,
Yeah.
but she's fallen in love with Mark, and she really wants to understand him.
Yeah, in a way, she's just as much voyeuristic as he is, but from a different, more of a curiosity angle.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, it's certainly not a driving compulsion, but she, right off the bat, like, she's shown films that she's kind of revolted by of Mark's childhood, but she doesn't turn away.
No, it just piques her interest in him.
Yeah.
And I think that
And it's an emotional connection with Mark.
it is. And I mean, we didn't touch base on this, but I mean, you get the feeling that Helen hasn't had much of a life. She's spent most of her life sort of taking care of her mother. Mm-hmm. So we've got another person damaged by the relationship with their parents. Mm-hmm. And I think there's this sort of connection she has with Mark, whether she realizes it or not, that these are two people who both are severely damaged by their parents in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because you have this rather plain girl who's probably, I'm not going to say probably not, but going to have a tough time finding a relationship with somebody else because of her relationship with her mother. And then you've got Mark, who's a reasonably handsome man, interesting in his own weird way, and equally damaged. There's a connection there that maybe isn't pointed out, but I think it's there. I think that's part of why she's so eager to get to know him a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah. Now, with the cops closing in, he kind of props up his camera, and this is a suicide moment.
It really is.
He's not going to get caught. He's not going to go to jail. And there's one more thing for him to capture.
And he makes it very clear that this was always his intent.
Yeah.
Like, this was always supposed to be the end of his film.
Yeah.
Which was a bit of a shocking reveal, actually, because you never really got the impression that his demise was part of his plan.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I don't know, because it does make sense because most of his life is on film already, so...
His end should be on film.
His end should be on film, and I think maybe that's part of completing his father's film and maybe capturing, in the hopes of capturing an emotion off of himself.
That's right, yes, because he's so limited in them.
Yeah. So he sets up his cameras. Multiple cameras, actually, were firing off, and... This is the final reveal of the camera he's been using on his victims. Now, of course, we know about the tripod leg and the knife on the end, so that's pointed outwards towards his throat. But the first time we see the reveal of the mirror at the top of the camera, mounted on top of the camera. Now, the mirror has been there to show the victim's own fear as he captures it on the camera.
To increase it even further. And
yeah.
So he's capturing them, seeing themselves in sheer terror. It actually made me go, that's so freaking creepy and cool at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, man, for a 60s movie, I'm like, oh, dude, that's dark.
That is just really dark. I mean, it's making somebody watch their own death on is pretty horrific.
Yeah. So, and then he impales himself on his throat. And dies.
Yeah, and that really is the end of the film.
I mean, that's a great place to just cut the film and go into our remake. That really, I almost don't even want to attempt because this film... No, we could bounce a couple ideas, but this movie is so perfect the way it is. I think any attempt, including our own... in fact, I know our own, but any attempt by any filmmaker today will not achieve what Michael Powell achieved with this film.
No, you could do an inspired by, but there's no way you could do a remake.
And that's the best, I think, the only way you could do it, and it's still never going to achieve what this film achieved.
No.
I mean, with today's modern technologies, being voyeuristic, you can certainly take that conceit a lot further. It's certainly going to be a lot easier to film your potential victims, although hiding a big ass mirror might be a little different. I don't know. It's a lethal selfie stick?
No, you point the camera at them this way so they can see themselves.
Yeah, I guess with smartphones.
I'm showing my phone, showing Jay the screen.
Yeah, because that totally worked on audio.
Yes,
yeah, I thought about that too. I'm like, you could... the smartphone version, so they're always seeing themselves.
That's right.
But on a selfie stick with a knife on the end of it.
Yeah, I can't see any real way to make it work
without being kind of comedic, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean, just the ludicrous thought of a selfie stick with a knife in it.
Yeah, it's entertaining. It goes from being a very powerful commentary to being a bit of a parody of itself.
Yeah, but he had in the 60s, he had his whole house wired for sound, so he could hear everything going on in every room.
Yes.
Now you could just wire the whole house with little micro cameras.
Yeah.
And computers, you could easily pop in with a computer. But the thing is, a lot of other movies have taken small ideas from this already.
Yeah, it's not a new idea anymore.
No, it might have been the first, but since then, 8mm come out and 1 hour photo, and like there's so many movies with that voyeuristic theme now that have taken pieces of it.
Shia LaBeouf, I can never say his name properly, with the where he's housebound, the remake of Rear Window.
Yeah.
Right? Rear Window even, right? Because I think there's a certain amount of voyeurism in that one.
Yeah, well, and voyeurism did play quite a bit into several Hitchcock movies, even prior to this one, actually.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And that's partly because of Hitchcock's nature, because he was a bit of a voyeur. He loved watching the human condition.
Yeah, right? And maybe that's where Powell's inspiration came from Hitchcock himself.
More than likely, it wouldn't surprise me. Again, they had a relationship for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't remake this movie either.
No.
As much as I can see ways around it, it's just going to be an inferior film.
The only way I could see doing it is not setting it in modern day. I mean, maybe not necessarily the 60s, but maybe sort of in between, like the late 80s, early 90s, before cell phone technologies became a lot more prominent, but the accessibility for the average person to video cameras and home video equipment.
Yeah.
Right? That would, I think you could potentially pull it off that way with a
movie
little bit of effort.
in the 70s or even 80s.
Yeah, like late 70s or even early 80s, but I think the late 80s, like mid to late 80s, would be perfect because that's when we had VCRs in the homes. The home video camera became available, so you moved from film to video.
Yeah, and they were still kind of bulky, but at the same time, similar devices.
Exactly, and you could get away with it because it wasn't something that everybody would have. Right?
Yeah.
So you sort of do it inspired by. You cannot straight up remake this movie. There's no way.
Yeah. There's just so much going on, and people don't make these thought-provoking movies like this anymore.
Well, they do, but they're few and far between, and it's harder and harder to find really good subject matter because it's all these great guys did it before.
Yeah.
Right? So your challenge is to how do you take something like this and make it new and interesting without just remaking it.
Yeah. Well, hell, I mean, it took this movie, Peeping Tom, 30 years later before it got revered for what it wanted to be, what it was intended to be. Yeah. I mean, it was a disaster critically and financially.
It was, yeah.
And destroyed his career. And then 30 years later, everybody wants to see it. But it's good that Powell lived to see the film's reevaluation.
Yes.
And what he actually achieved at that point, because it is an incredible movie. Now, when we enter these things, we do our fantasy casting for a remake. I didn't cast too much on this one because I'm like, ooh, this is really... no matter what you're going to do, you're going to have an inferior product. But I did come up with a little bit.
I surprisingly enough, the Mark character came to me really easily, and it's mostly because he was recently he's actually in Calgary right now, I think, actually. And I really like this actor. Most people recognize him from like Freaks and Geeks. He's been around for a long time, but he's been in a lot of stuff. And right now he's one of the actors in Silicon Valley, which I haven't seen, but I've heard is really good. And he's been starring in these indie films recently too. I went with Martin Starr. Mm-hmm. He's got that same sort of interesting, handsome face, but also that slightly awkward uncomfortableness that he pulls off very well in just about everything you ever see him in.
Yeah.
So I thought he'd be really interesting to see in something like this.
Yeah, I was kind of looking for that too. That handsome but awkward kind of look to him, and could look a little menacing at the same time. Yeah. He did not come easy to me at all, Mark. he was one of the last ones. I only really cast like 3 people because the rest of the cast is either murdered. Their scenes are quick enough that I don't think I didn't feel the need that I needed to go in and try to cast everybody.
No, I cast 6 people.
Yeah. Oh, that's twice as much as me.
Because I wanted to cast the cops, right? Because they have such even though they don't have a lot of screen time, they have a very important role in the film.
Yeah. I mean, now that I think about it, I should have recast Vivian, and I didn't. So.
And I did recast Vivian.
Okay. I mainly did Mark, Helen, and Helen's mom.
Yeah. I'll be interested if you came up with Helen and Helen's mom. And actually, when looking at this, this still works. So with Helen, I wanted that actress who could play plain, and she's an English actress, but she does American very well because we've seen her do American well. I did with Juno Temple.
Okay.
Because again, she kind of has that actually very similar face to Helen. Actually,
mm-hmm.
For Vivian, I went with Bella Thorne. She's quite young. She's only 18 or 19 years old right now, but she actually has a very similar look to Vivian in the movie. Younger, but very similar look, and the red hair and everything. I'm like, and I really thought that red hair was important.
I did too.
I don't know why, but I because so many
I
characters.
just put it in a different, on different characters, but there was something about having redheaded characters.
Yeah, and because there were a lot in the movie.
Yeah.
Both Helen and Vivian were redheads.
Yeah.
And which could lead into something in our discussion that we missed earlier is that correlation between Vivian and Helen both being redheads. Right. For Mrs. Stevens, Helen's mom, I'm with Lucy Lawless simply because of those freaking eyes. And she's such a great actress that's way underutilized. I think that she would have been great.
We're so used to her being in kind of over the top cheesy roles that we forget she can do serious drama as well.
The Spartacus TV series. She was so good in that.
Yeah, she was. That was what I was thinking of too.
Yeah. And then, for Inspector Greg, I went with Kevin Bacon just because I love Kevin Bacon.
Sure.
And then for the younger Detective Miller, I went with Hugh Dancy because he kind of looks similar to the actor in the original, right?
Yeah, totally.
And I like him. And now you're gonna like my director because I think he might be one of the few who could do this and reimagine it without ripping it off whole cloth and making it a parody. I went with Chan-wook Park, the director of the original Old Boy.
Oh, yeah. You know what? There's a guy I think who might be able to grasp
could bring
that.
something new to it without.
Yeah,
without trying to recreate what it.
Yeah,
the
I think it'd be a more violent movie under him.
For sure. Yeah,
which is fine.
I think ultimately any remake that's made is going to be a little more graphic.
But I think he'd be able to find some new messages to partake in that film.
Yes, exactly. I think he'd be able to do what we can't.
Yeah, actually, I like your choice better than mine. My director, I went with Mike Flanagan, who directed Oculus.
Also a good choice.
Yeah, that movie was probably far better than I expected it ever to be, and there were some interesting themes in there. So I still think your choice is a better choice, but I didn't want to go with some of the more obvious big name directors who've been influenced by this movie, because there are many.
There are many, and that's why I went to stay with him as well, because they'd be more inclined to try and copy him rather than take the story and make something new out of it.
Yeah,
and that's what I liked about Chan-wook Park, is because this isn't really a horror movie in the pure sense of the word. It is the first slasher film, quote unquote, but it's more of a psychological murder mystery.
Yeah, it kind of sits in the same fence as Psycho. Yeah. Like it's more of a thriller.
Yes.
Yeah. For my Mark Lewis, I went with Joe Anderson. You might better know him from The Grey. He was Flannery.
Oh, okay.
And Across the Universe, he was Max.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Yeah. There's just a certain kind of look, and just kind of looking through that, just as IMDb, I'm like, this guy's all over the place. So he could do a lot and a lot of different characters. So I think he might have the versatility to play that role. And it's something that I didn't see glaringly on his IMDb page. I'm like, oh, this might work for him.
Yeah.
And I just liked his look. Now, for Helen, I went with Karen Gillan, just to keep a Oculus connection.
There we go.
And Redheads.
Yes.
I was more thinking Redheads, and it just happened to connect up nicely. And she's about the right age for her. She's, I think, 23 now, so playing 21 is not a big deal. Anybody who's not sure who that is, come on, Amy Pond from Doctor Who. She was Nebula most recently in Guardians of the Galaxy, and of course Oculus. So check her out. I love me a Scottish redhead.
Yes, no, I knew who she was from Doctor Who more so than Oculus or even Guardians of the Galaxy.
And for her mom, Mrs. Stevens, who's a pretty important, powerful role, I went with Boogie Nights, Big Lebowski, Psycho remake star Julianne Moore.
Julianne Moore.
Julianne Moore.
I think I went with her on
just a week ago. Yeah,
just a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I went with her for something just because she's an incredible actress
and another redhead, just so I could have a genetic connection with the hair.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is hair colors are something you can change, fortunately, but... Yeah,
certainly. I like when I think about it, I'm like, well, hey, I don't have to worry about hair dye on this one.
Yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, we've had an unsuccessful attempt at remaking this movie because we wouldn't.
Well, and it just is. Yeah, Sam and I wouldn't. I was coming up with ideas, but all of my ideas were kind of inferior. Like, if I modernized it, the themes of the surveillance are just that much easier to do. Like, now instead of wiring the rooms for sound in the house, you can totally wire them up with cameras and GoPros and all sorts of bullshit. And it could be that much more voyeuristic than it was before. And with micro cameras and cell phone technologies, it's certainly easy to just throw a camera in a hat or
and and I think that would take away from the movie purely because the physicality of that camera is part of the story.
And the thing that tied me up so much was the mirror, this revealing your fear to yourself while being murdered, seeing your own fear,
watching your own death.
Technology be damned, there's so much advancement of the surveillance, and to be that Peeping Tom character, but to watch your own death, I'm like, what else is outside of turning a smartphone towards the victim, what else is there? And that just seems kind of silly.
It does. It doesn't have anywhere near the impact.
No.
And like I said, that's why if I had to, I would set it in the mid to late 80s, just to modernize it a little bit, but not too much. And like I said, move into the more modern videotape technology and so on, because that would eliminate the dark room, which does kind of play a part in the story, though.
Yeah, but I don't think it would fundamentally change it too much.
No.
But, the dark room's a fairly important set, but you could still keep the guy a photographer. You still need the dark room.
Yeah, and make him a stills photographer on a set instead of
and especially in the 80s, it's not, there's still no digital photography, so it's still traditional photography.
That's true, yeah.
And development.
Yeah, for sure, and certainly being a smut photographer in the 80s is a little different. But still, you could make that his whole career.
That shop owner would have so been arrested in the 80s.
Yeah.
That kid buys candy. There's pornography everywhere in that shop, in that newsstand.
Well, they're girly pictures. I think they're all wearing...
Yeah, it's more of that good girl calendar nudity kind of thing.
Yeah, it was the 50s pinup girl style stuff that had all over the place. But even so, it was still horribly inappropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. And then shooting his own stuff above his shop, oh, dude. And then selling stuff behind the counter.
Yes, which was obviously not stuff he could sell publicly.
No, so it makes me wondering what he was actually peddling.
Yeah. Yes.
There's a whole movie there.
Yeah. But yeah,
that I don't want to see.
No, really don't.
That disturbs me.
Really don't. That's moving into 8mm territory.
Yeah.
As you mentioned earlier. No, this movie, like I said, I think with the right director and the right writer, I think that a good homage could be made.
It's so good at what it does. I'm afraid a remake would wind up being the Psycho remake. Let's do a shot-for-shot remake and not really understand the material, and then the performances are just copied and they're not as good.
Exactly.
Because you're not getting an honest performance.
No, because you're not giving them anything really to work with. You're just giving them a note-for-note remake.
And I'm terrified that would be what this would be if it got remade.
That's right. And like I said, you can definitely do, like I said, we would maybe do an inspired by to try and capture the sort of core of the story. But there's no way I would try to remake this.
Yeah, you'd have to. That's about the only way you could do this, is to really kind of take the core conceit and then reconstruct it from the ground up and become something else.
That's right.
And have a different twist. I'm not sure what that's going to be. Nothing ever coalesced in my brain on this one.
No,
and I'll be the first to admit defeat on this one. This is the first one that broke me.
Yeah, even one over the Cuckoo's Nest, we at least had some ideas, but this one, it's just...
When I suggested this, I didn't know it was going to be as good as it was.
No,
it was just a movie I was aware of, had never seen, and then when I saw it, and I'm like, whoa, shit, this is a perfect movie. Oh, damn.
This might have been a little too ambitious.
Yeah, absolutely. So, remake it? No. Watch it? Abso-fucking-lutely.
Yes, we're sorry that we don't have a remake for you today.
Yeah, but this movie's so good that after I watched it, I'm like, I could just tell everybody to watch something else, but I really wanted to talk about this movie.
No, and that's what today's really been about, is talking about this movie, because it's just... There's so much to talk about. Now, and we didn't even really talk about Powell all that much.
No, not at all. he was an interesting guy, but when we talked about his connections with Hitchcock
Yeah.
and things like that. So.
Yeah, well, and he's an interesting man. I mean, his career was essentially ended by this movie.
Yeah.
As you mentioned,
he made about 3-4 movies after this, but
two
no
feature
more in
films
the
and
UK.
a documentary, or no, he did curated something.
Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah, and he didn't shoot any of them in the UK.
No.
He was done as a UK filmmaker.
Yeah, and I mean, it's unfortunate. 'Cause like I said, when you look at his body of work, and it's extensive. It's a big body of work. For it to end is...
I was surprised he didn't come over to the US, and maybe because he had been raked over the coals and in UK cinema that they probably didn't want him. But if he'd been championed by Hitchcock, I think he might have had a resurrection. Well,
you almost wonder if this was intended as his swan song. Like I said, because of what I observed, anyhow, personally, as a commentary on the film industry in England, it may even have been deliberate. I mean, he had to know that there was going to be controversy about this film.
Yeah, well, first time there was nudity in a UK film. First time we saw the POV killer cam. I think it was just too disturbing for the audience. And honestly, I wouldn't say too disturbing for the audience. That would have required people to actually see it.
Yes, too disturbing for the critics.
Too disturbing for the critics, and that's what killed it, I think. If it makes me wonder if Psycho would have had a similar response if he had filmed it for critics. And vice versa. Yeah. What if Peeping Tom didn't do a press screening?
Just went straight to the audiences
and let them judge. Yeah. Might have been a whole different scenario.
I suspect it would have been, because this is such a good film.
Yeah. I mean, there's shocking things for the 60s in Psycho as well. But, when I put these two films side by side and say, hey, here's the master Alfred Hitchcock and here is Michael Powell, his contemporary over in England, and I'm going to say Peeping Tom's a better movie.
I have to agree.
And that's high praise.
It really is high praise.
Like,
but
that
it
is
is
saying, because I
film.
adore the original Psycho.
I'm a big fan of it too, but Psycho never drew me in the way this one did.
No, me neither. Yeah.
I always knew I was watching a film.
Yeah.
Right? And I think part of it too is being aware that it's Hitchcock, and you kind of have a certain expectation of Hitchcock. Whereas this one it was a new experience, because I haven't seen any Powell films.
Yeah, I don't know if I know I haven't until now. Yeah. And it's a powerful piece of work. And even now, like, if you can get your mindsets in the 60s, and like, it's still a gripping film and still has tons of tension, and it just grabs you and never lets go until the end of the movie. And for a 60s movie to still achieve that in 2016 is quite something.
It is very much something, yes. And it's like I said, when Jay told me that we were going to watch this movie, and I started doing the research on it, just because he wanted me to do he recommended I do some reading to find out about Powell and all that stuff. And as soon as I started reading the synopsis, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to watch this. Mm-hmm. Like, I was really looking forward to it. And I'm like, ooh, 1960, that's right at the edge of the stuff that I'm comfortable watching, because I usually find those older films so dated that I just don't enjoy them as much as I would like to.
Yeah.
But this one totally stands up.
Yeah, totally. Just beautiful piece of work. Highly recommended. Go seek it out. Now, do you guys have your favorite movies? What do you think is a perfect film? I really want to know. Like, we discovered this by accident, despite a lot of top filmmakers kind of referencing it. There's one thing to say it and then one thing to see it. Yeah. So we saw it. We loved it. What is a movie that surprised you, that blew you away, far exceeded any kind of expectations, even if you didn't have any? Let us know. You can do that over at our Twitter feed at Invasion Remake, Invasion of the Remake on Facebook, and of course Invasion of the Remake at gmail.com if you want to email us. Now, of course, if we're posting, please repost us on Facebook, on your Twitter feed. Help everybody discover the show, as Trish likes to say, get more earballs on the show.
Yes, please do.
That's right. We miss you, Trish. Feel better. If you're on iTunes, especially if you're listening to us on iTunes, drop us a review, give us 5-star rating. Really helps us out there. The more ratings and the more reviews we have, the more likelihood we're going to get featured on the main page, and that's something every podcaster wants, including us.
Especially us.
Especially us. We've been doing this over a year now, so come on, help us out. We're getting there, but we need your help out there as well. We don't make any money off the podcast. We're not going to ask you guys for any money. Not to say we won't have advertising in the future, but right now we want to keep it as advertising and cost-free as we can, and the only way we can do that is with your support by sharing the podcast and helping us spread the word of the invasion of the remake, because it's the only way you stop an invasion is to make people more aware of it.
Exactly. Tell your friends.
Tell your friends. Tell 5, 10, 15 friends, and we will be oh so grateful.
Yes. Because it's good. We're fun. We're funny. Sometimes we're assholes.
And sometimes we fight.
And sometimes we fight. And sometimes we do stuff like this episode, which was just so much fun. I'm sorry, this has probably been one of my favorite episodes so far we've done.
There you go. I love it when we see a great movie. That's the one thing about this podcast that I never get tired of it. Sometimes I'll see a shitty movie and I'll have my reactions to it, but then I'll see something like, I don't know if I would have ever seen Peeping Tom otherwise. I
probably never would have.
I was vaguely aware of it through some horror documentary I'd seen, and they, probably spent 60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes on it and talking about how great it was, and then they moved on to the next movie. So it was just enough to make me curious about what this was and why it did what it did to Powell's career. So now I've seen it, and I can certainly understand why critics were shocked by it, but I think the general audience might have had a different reaction. I don't know. Maybe it's just that stiff British thing, but I think they moved forward with violence and nudity in film a lot quicker than the Americans did.
Yeah, this kind of like broke the gates open almost, you'd think.
Yeah, and it's mild. It's so mild.
It is. Yeah, by today's standards, it's extremely mild.
Yeah.
You expect it to be shocking, and it's not in the sense that you might think.
Yeah, but I was still shocked right at the beginning of the movie. I actually am like, oh.
That's why I said not in the sense that you might think.
Yeah.
Because, it's not gory. It's not incredibly violent, even though they talk about the violence in it. It's not incredibly violent. It's implied violence, which was quite often more effective than real violence.
Yeah, and you will find, despite the deplorable things that the main character does, you two are drawn in by his charm.
You're kind of he's very empathetic.
Yeah, he's very much an empathetic character.
Yeah, because you do kind of like him, even if he does make you uncomfortable.
As much as he is the victimizer, he's also the victim of the film.
Yes, and they make that very clear as part of the film, and I think that's part of what makes it so powerful. Is this is not just a psychopath. This is a guy who's a victim and been victimized himself. You're right. That's exactly the best way to put it.
Yeah. All right, well, that's it. For Trish, I am Jason.
I'm Sam.
And we're out of here. Hopefully Trish will be back with us next week. Cheers.
I've been watching you.
Oh.
Have you been filming those policemen?
I have a few quite interesting shots of them. It's a chance I never expected.
Chance for what?
To photograph an investigation. Or as much of it as I can get.
What on earth for?
It will complete a documentary.
Documentary? What's it about? What's it about?
I'd rather not tell you till it's finished. And it will be soon.
Suppose they catch you.
Oh, they will. They look very efficient.
Don't you mind?
No.
Mark, are you crazy?
Yes. Do you think they'll notice?